Hello, and welcome to Datadol's Cafe. My name is Stian, and I'm a coffee-addicted mechhead who wants nothing more than to see more people succeed and have fun with my favorite mechanologist hero, Datadol MK2. You can find me on Twitter, or X, under the name Fab Eriksen. If you have any feedback, ideas for future content, or know someone that have excelled on this hero, do not hesitate to reach out. I'm hoping to build a small but engaged community that can hang out and discuss this hero at the cafe together. A quick disclaimer before we jump into the first ever video on the channel. There's no publishing schedule here. New videos will come out whenever there's news, whenever someone does something memorable, or whenever I feel like it. There's no stress, no rush, no nothing at the cafe. So I suggest you pause the video here and go get yourself a nice cup of coffee, a tea, or whatever warm brew you imagine we'd serve here. Let's get into it. Today we're going to talk about one of my favorite cards and the many ways to pilot it. Microprocessor is a 2-cost mechanologist item that only Datadol can have in their deck. It has a blue color strip, meaning it pitches for 3, and like every other mechanologist item, it cannot be used to defend with from hand. But let's talk about what happens when the card comes into play. To those of us who have some experience with playing our Mechanical Queen, it's obvious that this card was created to compensate for 3 intellect, which Datadol has. And although it might not have made her competitively viable, the card is still an extremely versatile piece of technology that can be used in a million different ways. The first time you activate each microprocessor, you gain an action point, which makes it a viable opening action. And speaking of, there are 3 once per turn actions to choose from. Opt 1. Opt 1 lets you look at the top card of your deck and leave whatever you find on top or put it on the bottom of your deck. And why is this great for Datadol? Let's quickly remind ourselves of her hero ability. Whenever a mechanologist item with cost 2 or less is put into your banish zone from your deck, put it into the arena. As Datadol, our game plan is to locate and banish as many items as possible, as fast as possible. We're terrible at the start of the game, as we have little defensive and offensive output. If everything goes according to plan, however, our late game can be devastating. Securing this game plan is Microprocessor's main objective. Opting helps us either locate items or skip past cards that won't do us any good hanging around in the banish zone. The second once per turn action is draw a card and put a card from your hand on top of your deck. 3 intellect is awful in every single way possible. The worst, however, is ending up with a tiny hand full of items. 1 item in hand means 33% of your hand can't block. 2 items mean more than half of your cards have no defensive value. Yikes. To make matters worse, items don't have go again, so playing them from hand or arsenal usually means you're ending your turn there. With the second once per turn action, we often eliminate this problem and turn it into an advantage. You get to cycle your hand, and guarantee your first card banished from boosting is an item. Alternatively, if you're already pitching to pistol, chambers, and purifiers each round, you can end your turn with a double activation to grab an attack action card for your arsenal on the first, and then reactivate it to banish the top card of your deck, which is our third and last once per turn action. Banish the top card of your deck. This is a fairly straightforward one, but it is a great option to have in a multitude of different scenarios. Essentially, you do the exact same thing as when you're boosting, putting the top card of your deck into the banish zone. Optical Monocle is an item that lets you up to 5 times, and it is the bread to this activation's butter. Considering Datadol's hero ability, this is an absolute bonkers duo, especially in the early turns, where you're searching frantically for those essential or defensive items. Now, this is still a strong activation even without knowing what's on top of your deck. If you've played a full turn with 3 boosts and a Teklo Foundry Heart activation and still haven't seen an item, well, chances are there's one sitting on top of that deck, waiting to be drawn into your hand at the end of your turn. Why not end your turn with a flip? Which brings us to our next point. You want to boost, which means you'll still have an action point after your last attack action card has been played, or you've shot pistol and given a go again with the induction chamber. Microprocessor is great for setting up the right cards to boost when you've been handed an item. In the case of already having a great hand that you can play out fully, however, I urge you to remember that this is also a card with high end of turn value as well. Cycling your hand just to cycle your hand might be a waste, but it might also not be. However, the odds are already stacked against us, so let's gamble as little as possible when we're dealt a decent turn. Optical Monocle was a staple in Datadol long before the release of Microprocessor in Neverfest. Opting is our best friend, and Optical Monocle lets us do that 5 times. That's huge. Prior to Microprocessor's release, you'd usually activate it to set up the first boost of your turn or break combat chain to try and find as many items as possible. With a Microprocessor, however, 2 activations create some really awesome synergies. Depending on what you find, you can banish the top card of your deck when Optical Monocle reveals an item, or use draw card and put one on top of your deck to maximize the damage output of your turn. It'll also help you out of sticky situations like having an item stuck in hand and have it come into play for free. Remember, items belong in the banish zone. If you're not running Teklo Foundry Heart, you're gonna have a bad time. Not only is this bad boy good for a total of 3 blocks, it also lets you banish 2 cards that in a worst case scenario gives you an extra resource, but in a best case scenario you get 2 items into play additionally. Again, 2 items in one go is a dream scenario that we just can't rely on. What we can do, however, is get the next best thing. As mentioned with Optical Monocle, drawing a card and putting one on top is a way out of ending your turn with an item by utilizing Teklo Foundry Heart. You may go boost for 0, get a resource from Hyperdriver, boost for 0, but the last card on hand is an item. Break the combat chain to draw a card and put one on top of your deck with Microprocessor. You'll most likely get an attack action card instead. Oh shoot, it's a red throttle that costs you. Activate Teklo Foundry Heart, get the additional resource and the item you just replaced throttle with into the arena and throttle away. You may already have a great hand, but you're missing a resource to play all cards. Well, if you know you're gonna use Teklo Foundry Heart, why not use Microprocessor to up one beforehand? Much like with Dash, you'll be swimming in action points on your high octane turns. Now, you could pew pew for 2, but in the early stages of the game, a high octane turn is also a facilitator of doing some pretty crazy stuff with Microprocessor. Activating every single once per turn action on the card twice, for example. Now, that is a dream scenario where you have 2 Microprocessor in play, have a card in arsenal, and get to boost 3 times. Still, since you only get an action point the first time you activate Microprocessor, High Octane makes it possible to go nuts with it. Try searching for chambers, purifiers, or one of our defensive items instead. There's also a point to be made for using microprocessor to opt in advance of playing your High Octanes. You'll be drawing a card, so why not make sure it's something that fits your High Octane turn. I hope this video has opened your eyes to what this incredible card is capable of. Although I haven't covered every single useful scenario, these are some I recognize as being the most useful, and the way I pilot the cards most often. This whole YouTube game is new to me, but I'd love to hear what you think. Was there something I missed? Do you have any ideas that deserve the light of day? Is there anything you want to see on this channel? Comment below or come hang out in our Discord, where I'd love to share ideas, discuss strategies, or just have a great digital time with all of you. Link is of course in the description.